Thank you for joining us today for Armchair Historians. I'm your host, Anne-Marie Cannon. Armchair Historians is a Belgian Rabbit production. Stay up to date with us through Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Wherever you listen to your podcast, that is where you'll find us. You can also find us at armchairhistorians.com. Armchair Historians is an independent, commercial-free podcast. If you would like to support the show, you can buy us a cup of coffee through Ko-fi, or you can become a subscribing member through Patreon. You can find links to both in the episode notes. I recently had the opportunity to talk to Eric Walter, filmmaker, director extraordinaire. For the most part, that interview centered around the disappearance of Keith Reinhard in Silver Plume, Colorado, which is the subject of Eric's soon-to-be-released documentary, The Dark Side of the Mountain. However, I couldn't let him get away without talking about his award-winning film, My Amityville Horror, especially since the Halloween season is upon us. In the documentary, Daniel Lutz recounts his version of the infamous Amityville haunting that terrified his family in 1975. George and Kathleen Lutz's story went on to inspire a best-selling novel, and the subsequent films have continued to fascinate audiences today. This documentary reveals the horrors behind growing up as part of a world-famous haunting. And while Daniel's facts may be others' fiction, the psychological scars he carries are indisputable. So, for your spooky listening pleasure, here's an outtake from my interview with Eric Walter about the making of My Amityville Horror, as well as a discussion about the paranormal. I do want to say that before I came on, I watched half of My Amityville Horror.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
So you are, I love the cinematography in that, by the way. It was beautiful.
To this day, there has never been a good narrative film made about that house. The first one maybe for nostalgia's sake, but even that, it's not a good movie, right? They've all been really schlocky horror films. And so my film, appropriately titled My Amityville Horror, was really depicting, and it was very, very difficult because Danny is a very difficult personality. Yeah. He was extremely damaged by what did or did not happen there. And I can say that while I do, in the years since the film has come out, I do think there were some things certainly elaborated upon. I think there's a little bit of a bravado and a theatrical nature to Danny when he's sitting in front of the camera telling his story. He knows I'm doing this.
You allow that to unfold, which is what I liked about it, because there's so much more to the documentary than the story. There's all the different personalities and yeah.
Right. Well, I really wanted to flip it on its head where, we had this kind of black sheep of the Lutz family who George Lutz, up until the time he died, he passed away in 2006. And he was essentially the one shepherding the story, the one out in public telling the story. Christopher, the youngest boy, middle child, sort of had come out in the public a little bit, but he never told his story. He had just been out there fighting George in public in court, and there'd be like an Inside Edition episode of like Chris saying something about George. And so there was this infighting. And then when I got to know Danny, you saw why Danny had been essentially the lost witness of the Amityville case. And that was because he was essentially, the black sheep of the family, had fought George, had admitted on camera to the investigative reporter and people that we worked with for that film that he meant to kill George. He wanted to kill George. And in a lot of ways, a lot of people have criticized just because Danny's so, using bad language against George, and, it's a person who's deceased. I was really trying to illustrate Danny's haunted by George, his stepfather. And he's haunted by the house. Yes. But it's more of the haunted man story, and haunted by the media onslaught, and haunted by being made a character in a movie. And there's this kind of fatal attraction that Danny's sitting there talking about something he says he doesn't want to talk about. So it's a little bit of read between the lines. A lot of people criticized Danny and, just hated on what Danny had to say. And that's okay. I think everyone wants to believe this so much that they want proof of something. You can never give anyone proof of any of this. I mean, he's talking about levitating beds. I mean, and I will say this, while I do think some things were elaborated upon, and I think Danny, embellished things, I certainly do believe that. However, I do think by and large, Danny believes what he's saying. He believes the house was haunted. He believes, you could see the pain on his face.
Mm-hmm.
And again, this is my opinion. I'm not a degreed psychologist, so I'm not diagnosing him. I'm just saying my opinion, having gotten to know him, was that, there was something very real, that it was very real for him. So if you want to provide anyone proof that house was haunted or something evil happened in the house, I look no further than My Amityville Horror, because I think you can see it in his eyes. And I think that was the real horror, was this child who at the time was 45 when we interviewed him for this film. And it was a traumatic thing. It was a catharsis for him in many ways to be able to get it off his chest and do it on his terms.
Mm-hmm.
And my intention was to get all of the children to speak. I knew that was a long shot, but I was very lucky to, we almost got Chris to get involved with the film, but he at the last minute pulled out of the thing. There was still infighting between the Chris and Danny, and there was just so much. It blew this family apart. I tell people all the time about Amityville, I'm more interested in what happened after than what they say happened in the house. Because it's the story we all know. And I know I'm glossing over a lot of it, but anyone can read the book if they want to know what the book
Just
is. Probably the closest.
Another coincidence is I lived a town over from the Warrens, and I remember
Oh my God.
I moved to Connecticut, and people are like, "Oh, the Warrens," and I'm like, "Who are the?" I just was remembered about that. Yeah, I lived in Newtown.
Right. Well, Lorraine was a lovely person.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you ever got to meet her. I'm also very skeptical of a lot of the research tactics, let's say, of the Warrens and some of the other parapsychologists that have gotten involved. But I cannot deny Lorraine was a wonderful person and so gracious, and allowed us into her home at 6 a.m. when we came knocking on her door. And we were down there, with the Annabelle doll in a glass case with a red light on it. And it's this kind of hodgepodge of like 100 baby dolls in a room over here. And then there's like Halloween decorations, and there's actual satanic ritual artifacts and things in the hallway. And yeah, it was really fascinating and a dream to be there. And of course we had Danny Lutz with us. We had Laura DiDio, who's a good friend of mine, who was an investigative reporter, who was 19 at the time that in 1975 when this story broke.
Well, let me just ask you this question. Do you think there's something to it, to the paranormal aspect? Do you
of the Amityville case, or just in general?
In general.
Oh, in general. I think the paranormal is very normal. We just don't understand what it is. Okay. And I think so. I have had my own experiences of strange goings on that I have found strange, that, until you're in those shoes, it's very hard to convey to somebody, because otherwise it's just another campfire story and everyone's, oh, that's weird. But when it happens to you, and I actually am very interested in that as a documentarian too, is like the need to communicate that this happened. And that was something that I felt from Danny, was this desire that you better believe every word I'm saying. And like at the end of the film, I even questioned him, would you take a polygraph test? And he took it as an insult. And a lot of people see in the film, they think that he's lying because he reacts so strongly. But if you listen to what he's saying, he actually says, yes, he would. But he took it as like an affront, an assault on his credibility, which is interesting. So again, it's very, so to get back in your question, with Amityville, I do think it's possible something went on. I hesitate to think that there were levitating objects and
Yeah.
beds and people
Sure.
levitating in their beds and all of this, and that stretches it for me. But there had been such negative energy expelled in that house.
Mm-hmm.
6 people had lost their lives just several months prior. And to make it matters worse, the Lutz family purchased, furniture from the DeFeo estates, including the bed frames that their children were sleeping in. So Danny's bed was one of
They
the.
say that. Okay, I'll tell you a little more about myself. So I run a historic walking tour business, which I am not doing this year, which is why I'm doing the podcast. So my most popular tours are my ghost tours.
I want to come take that tour.
Okay, I will be glad to take you anytime. I'm intrigued. I go back and forth on what I believe. I always tell my tours that, I don't wholeheartedly believe in this, but I tell my stories, whatever. But having said that, they say that like spiritual energy can stay in, objects.
There's so many cases of there will be no hauntings going on. Someone will buy a piece of furniture that's used or something from some other location. They'll bring it into the home, and suddenly things will start happening. Or someone will move a piece of furniture that's already there. They'll move it to a different part of the house, and things will start happening. Now, I'm very interested in the work of like Lloyd Auerbach, who's a parapsychologist, the late Dr. William Roll, credible parapsychologists, degreed, who have a more, I don't know, say secular viewpoint, but have a little bit more of like a tangible, like I want to go in and look for consistency,
right.
And they're less into the religious aspect of demons and this type of thing. But again, with Amityville, it's very hard to deny there was seemingly negative aspect to this case, and the people and the Lutz's claim that followed them after they moved to San Diego, and were living with very, very little money, which is contributed to, I think, why they decided to do a book deal and do this whole thing. They realized the monetary value of what they had experienced, and they went with it. And in a lot of ways, in one ways you can say, oh, I don't blame them for doing that. But I think my film certainly is a long retrospective look at why it was probably not a good idea. And Danny, I think, has his own problems. So it's not all attributed to the Amityville house, but it's all kind of it's all pivoted from that in a way. And it's just curious. It's a psychological kind of character study on.
Yeah, it really is. And that's what I loved about that documentary.
And not to get back to shift gears too much, but to talk about Dark Side of the Mountain again.
Okay.
Part of what I can reveal in coming to this documentary is that there also is a very human psychological aspect of this as well, just in a different way. There are members of the Reinhard family and other people attributed to it in the town. Everyone believes something different.
Yeah.
And in a lot of ways, the easiest, simplest explanation is often ignored because, well, it couldn't just be that easy, which is interesting to me. As we said before, when you don't have any answers, your mind is left to wander and create scenarios. And just like the stories of Clifford Griffin and others throughout history, we see that happening again. So it's very, so Dark Side in a way is kind of an extension onto what Amityville kind of did or was saying, just in, I think, a much broader and bigger, more profound way.
Right. I'm excited. I can't wait to see it. Wait to see what you did with it. Okay, so I have one more paranormal thing to say. What you said when you were prefacing your response to the paranormal, I agree that there is an explanation. We just don't know what it is. And I don't know what that means, but I think that there is probably a scientific explanation. We don't understand it. We don't have the capacity to do that now, but I'm a little more practical and pragmatic about it. But when I do a tour, I
Me
have to
too.
kind of entertain a lot, because really a big part of the tour is that, I ask people, well, what do you think? Have you ever had an experience? And so
Well,
it ends up being like ghost stories. We talk a lot about ghost stories, especially if and most people do want to talk about that, like you said. So it's interesting, but
friends of mine get on me all the time about, well, if you're such an agnostic, why are you you're so wrapped up in this and so interested? I mean, take a look. You can't probably see it, but back here on my shelf, I've got probably 1,000 ghost books, and
oh,
but
cool.
all like nonfiction ghost books, right? No, it's
Okay.
just I'm very passionate about wanting
Yeah.
to tell those stories, and I love hearing people. But at the same time, I want to see the proof too.
Yeah.
As I mentioned, I have had experiences too
Yeah.
in my lifetime that I can explain, and I'm open minded that, hey, there could be some natural explanation that I wasn't um, thinking or realizing at the time, but I've thought it through it um, so many different ways, and in both instances, there's not really any way to explain them.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things when you don't have an explanation. Again,
Yeah.
it's
It's
what
fun.
do you
And
do about that?
we're moving into that time of year. And I do have to say that something happens. I don't know if it's because of the change of seasons, they call the shoulder season or whatever, but it pushes up against your senses. And, I think strange things feel like they start happening, especially in Georgetown. But
Well, that's true. And a lot of people say that about the Amityville case. I mean, can you imagine moving into a house with your children and knowing that, hey, in these rooms, people were horribly murdered? I can
I
imagine that
wouldn't
would
want to
affect
live
your
there.
psyche. No,
Is the house still there, or did they ever? It
it's
is still
still
there.
there. They changed the address to, it was formerly 112 Ocean Avenue. It's now 108 Ocean Avenue. They changed the iconic windows that were quarter moon, kind of jack-o'-lantern, evil persona looking eyes, they called them. They changed them to just squares. But the house is still there, yeah. And it's, I believe I've heard, I haven't been there in a few years, but I've heard that they put a fence up along the front yard now, which is pretty funny. But I think they did that just to deter, no matter what they do, they're not going to be able to deter this tourist. I mean, the name
Yeah.
of the town, Amityville, is now notorious.
Right.
With there's just no way to get rid of
Sure.
it. So,
Yeah.
but still to this day, and I know having worked on the doc and having worked on other TV shows that have done Amityville episodes, and there's another one coming out later this year that I was a part of that also had the same experiences. They just deny filming requests pretty much.
Okay.
Or if you're going to do anything that promotes the story, the Lutz story, that it was true, they won't participate. So it's interesting. They still to this day, and it's been this many years later,
Yeah.
they haven't come around. There have been people in the town that have wanted to turn it into a bed and breakfast, but a little morbid being that there were murders there. But you have the Lizzie Borden bed and breakfast, so I don't know why we can't have the Amityville. But anyway, I think it would probably be in bad taste, right?
How many, do you know how many owners have been since the Lutz family?
Well, the family that the Cromartie family that moved there after the Lutzes ended up suing them for invasion of privacy and all these trumped up charges of, anybody that moved in there and after that book came out knew what they were getting into. I mean,
Yeah.
people were driving all along the lawn, and there was just crazy. So it was turning into a circus act, and it's never stopped for this many years. But let's see. So the Cromarties, there were several. Let's see. It's got to be at least 5 families since, 5 or 6. I don't know its current occupants, but the last ones that I know of, the D'Antonios, were also of the mind that there's nothing here. And I've been told, very upset that Danny decided to come out and talk.
Well, it's what happens when you buy, that house, right?
Right.
I know in Newtown, the woman, the shooting that happened there at Sandy Hook,
Hmm.
the house that they lived in, I knew Nancy, I knew them, but the house that they
Oh my
lived
God.
in, they actually ended up just destroying because
Right.
of the bad mojo.
Well, I remember telling my producer friend who came with me to my first trip in Silver Plume, and I hate to say this about the Silver Plume because it's such a beautiful town, but I said the whole notion of a stigmatized property, right?
There you have it. For more information about Eric Walter and My Amityville Horror, be sure to check out our episode notes. But also, I strongly suggest you listen to my full-length interview with Eric Walter about the soon-to-be-released documentary Dark Side of the Mountain. Thanks for joining us. Have a great week.